Hello, welcome to James's pre-fight, post-fight MMA show, where we recap all the important things happening in the sport of MMA, and I, your host James, try to explain to you what's going on in the sport and make it as easy as 1, 2, 3 for you to understand. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to Fantasy Assemble, everybody. And here we're not going to talk about MMA. We're not here to talk about comic books. We're here to recontinue our conversation that concerns Jake Paul's career in the sport of boxing. Recently, we just had our very successful podcast where we previewed his fight with Anderson Silva. We meaning my co-host Mike, who is back again. We're going to talk about what we think should be the next step for his career, why. We're going to weigh out the choices a little bit and why we made the conclusions that we did. So it's going to hopefully, we think it's going to be a pretty quick one. We're just going to talk about what's his next step and why. So first, before we get into the next, what should be his next step, just so then the viewer has a good perspective of how Jake Paul is doing his boxing career. If you didn't watch the fight or you didn't really look up any clips or anything like that, he won via unanimous decision against Anderson Silva. And I was told it was competitive and that Jake, what really stood out is he dropped him in the last round. So, Mike, as what I like to call you, our residential Jake Paul super fan, how did you think he performed against Anderson? Were you impressed? Were you unimpressed? Or were you just like, it was okay? What did you
Yeah,
think?
well, I think, like we said going into this fight, was that this is going to be Jake's toughest fight, his most
Mm-hmm.
competitive fight, and that's exactly what it was. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks about Jake Paul in his prior fights, but definitely, I think this is one where you were definitely most worried about him losing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, I feel like he showed some level of improvement, probably like on his feet, like. And I think he did a good job of not letting himself get pummeled. Like, he went
Okay.
to, you know, he was always working to shield himself when he was getting pummeled. And he
Okay.
never let Anderson Silva get those like really like devastating combinations. Like Silva was really getting to him at times, but like he would always just kind of get back into the clinch
Mm-hmm.
and protect himself. And a lot of people were annoyed, but like I said, he was a survivor and he was showing his ability to survive. And, in the world of combat sports, sometimes just going the distance is all you need to do. And I think he was good too at times, like with combinations, the body
Mm-hmm.
combinations where he'd go low and then come up top. Like,
Okay.
he showed some good moves. I think, like I said, he didn't come out like drastically much better. Like this wasn't
Yeah.
like, wow, he's ready for like,
Canelo or something.
yeah, right. Like he's not like on that level.
Yeah.
Um, but he looks
So,
somewhat improved, and I think Anderson still got a lot in him.
uh-huh.
Like, people are like, well, why are you beating up on a grandpa? 50-year-old guy, he's washed. I'm like, man, Anderson Silva could freaking beat a lot of guys out there now, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
like Anderson Silva's still one heck of a striker.
So,
And
so basically, what I'm getting from you is physically not that different, but you just think he's probably just a little bit more intelligent, right, with his
yeah, I think he's
resources.
developing better instincts. I think um he's developing his strengths. He knows what he's good at. And he knows what he's not good at. And I mean, that's pretty it. Like, this isn't like something super pretty and beautiful boxing to break down punch by punch, blow by blow, and overanalyze. I mean, it's sloppy at times. It's not pretty. He's not the most polished guy out there. But at the end of the day, um, it was a competitive fight. Could have went either way. I think that knockdown was decisive. I think that knockdown kind of really, really like solidified
Okay.
um, him in that to get that. Because like in the first Woodley fight, he didn't have a big moment like that. He just
Yeah.
survived and went the distance.
But
Um,
this one, that was
so
it pretty
right,
much,
so
right?
like in his his second win that wasn't a knockout or a finish. Now he comes out and he gets a knockdown in the process of winning by decision. And against a guy who's the most well-rounded person he's faced.
Yeah,
No, I don't want to discredit Woodley because he was very very good in the octagon. But obviously Anderson Silva is very much more well-rounded and
yeah,
capable of.
in the boxing world, yeah,
Right. Like for him to make that transition, he already has too. Like he fought before, so you know, uh, I think it's a good win. I don't think it was an undeserved win. Some people were saying that, what fight were you watching? When you get to the fact of that Jake got the decision, but like I said, I think when he broke it down, he got a lot of those combinations in. They were good stuff.
oh,
Um,
oh, okay, I get the idea. So let's get into, so we talked about the past, so let's get into the future.
yeah.
And you and I have discussed this. You and I love just throwing around any names at all. Oh, Jake Paul, he's gonna fight Butterbean, and uh, so we you and I were brainstorming, and this the culmination will come here for the viewer. Who should Jake Paul fight next? That's the big question, right? And me and Mike, we have created a science, well, specifically Mike has brought this to me, that you must find the person who perfectly intersects someone who is believable enough that, when they fight, it's gonna be a fight, right? It's not gonna be like, oh, like someone like, some young guy beating up like a guy who doesn't know anything. So you have to have him stepping up a level, and then you have to have somebody who, in terms of entertainment and name value, is there. So they have to perfectly intersect. So me and Mike have created a little bit of choices in the list, and Mike and I have been discussing who we're gonna say should be next. So I'll give the choices out for the viewer before Mike reads out who he believes should be the next guy for Jake Paul to fight. And so everybody gets the perspective of like, all right, these are the guys that everybody's looking at. So after the fight, he called out Nate Diaz and Canelo Alvarez, which Canelo we're not even gonna take seriously because he's pound for pound. He's like up there in the pound for pound list in terms of boxing, and Jake's not there. So Nate Diaz is one choice. He's a UFC fighter, a very big name, of course, very attached to Conor McGregor. Then the next name we have is revisit. It would be Tommy Fury, the younger half brother of Tyson Fury. They were scheduled to fight a little bit ago. Mike and I almost mistakenly bought tickets for that. Thankfully, we didn't. And I'm gonna throw in. So somebody Mike brought up is Uriah Hall, also another former UFC fighter. He's he fought on the card. He looked okay. I was told, and his opponent wasn't the best. He wasn't a boxer or anything like that. And then for for laughs, I'll throw in Andrew Tate, who I'll be honest with anybody. I don't really know where he came from. I understand that he was on Big Brother, and that he did kickboxing, but I've watched his kickboxing fights. It's not too impressive. So I think Jake will probably beat him. But all these guys, what they have in common is they have a name. Some of them value differently than others, and they're also very close to the weight of Jake Paul. Jake Paul usually fights 190, 180 something. All these guys are basically fight like 180s, mid 180s to 190. So that's the thing I see. So taking into account with the fame, with the skill level, with the name value, who do you believe, Mike, should be Jake Paul's next fight?
Well, I just want to start and say who it shouldn't be.
Okay,
Um,
yes.
and it's definitely not Andrew Tate. I
Even
think
though it'd be kind of funny though, but yeah,
it would be, but I think at this point, like it's something that you do in like a YouTube like celebrity card, and I think it'd be better fitted for like Logan Paul. But
yeah, yeah,
Logan's too busy. He's gonna become the WWE champion. But that's another story. But I think that's just something that's it's a fun idea because they're both similar personalities, I guess, although
yeah,
different
yeah,
different delivery, different look, different delivery, but similar. They're both good at agitating people.
yeah. Like
Um,
Tate, like everybody wants to see him, get punished for the things he says.
right,
Right, he fights Jake.
right. And I don't think Uriah Hall showed enough in his fight with Le'Veon Bell, who is a retired
Hmm.
NFL running back. I think that would be a step down. I think, and I
Well, since
believe in my heart that Nate
uh
Diaz should be Jake Paul's next fight.
okay,
And the reason I say that is because that Nate Diaz is in a position where he just got his final send off in the UFC. He's looking, I'm sure he's got a bunch of different things he can do. But one, I think Nate Diaz is someone who's popular
hmm
amongst casual fans against people who aren't like mega fans of the sport and follow boxing or mixed martial arts or any kind of combat sports. I think he's a household name, especially from his McGregor fights.
yeah, I would
Um,
agree. Yeah.
like I have friends who are casuals, both MMA and boxing, like they pay attention to both, but they're casual. And
Hmm.
Nate Diaz is someone they know and love. So like I feel like this just makes the most sense. Um, and I think, Nate Diaz obviously is gonna have to take some time to train and obviously he's gotta, entertain other offers and I'm sure, you know, he can find a lot of different things to do. He's very hot free agent right now.
Hmm. Probably the
Um,
biggest right now. Yeah.
and I look, and I'll be paying attention to whatever he does because I genuinely, I'm a fan of his, and that's the thing. Like I want to, just like I love Anderson Silva, and most mixed martial arts fans love Anderson Silva. So that was another thing. Like that's what made him a draw, right? So it's like putting together someone with the draw, right? The
Hmm.
draw ability and the likability. And now the difference here is that he's not a spring chicken, but Nate
Yeah.
Diaz is closer, is much younger than Anderson Silva at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now Jake Paul can face someone who's a solid fighter and was at pretty good high level. Woodley was too, but Woodley was never the draw that Nate Diaz was.
Yeah. It was just the name, like the champion
Right.
status.
Right. He had, and now you can take away the narrative. Oh, I beat someone who's almost 50 years old. So you can
Hmm.
kind of. I think Nate Diaz would be a unique, interesting challenge with drawing power.
Hmm.
And I think it's that simple. And I don't know if and like to mention Logan again, like Nate Diaz and Logan Paul could be something that happens first. Like
Yeah, they could like a build up a little bit, right?
right, right, exactly. Like you don't want to do 4 months from now Nate Diaz versus Jake and burn out all the steam. Like it's something
Yeah.
that's
Well,
probably going to happen like a year and a half down the line. Maybe he fights Logan first. Maybe he goes and does something else.
hmm.
Go find somewhere else to a different octagon to fight in. Who
Yep.
knows? Maybe he'll take on some other
Yeah, another
boxing.
boxer. Yeah, yeah.
Right, like
I think
who
that's a
knows?
good idea.
Or maybe face another UFC fighter in a boxing ring. You
Nate
know,
Diaz versus Anderson Silva.
right? Like I don't know, right? We don't know, like right?
That
Like
could
he could,
happen.
like because if you're Nate Diaz right now, this post UFC career is going to be about making as much money as possible.
Hmm.
And right, so that's what I'm saying. Like if Nate Diaz is going to go jump right into Jake Paul and get beat by Jake Paul, it kind of takes all the wind out of his sail.
Yeah.
But I think he needs to spend some time building up his post UFC brand. But I think somewhere down the line, and I don't think Jake should be fighting every 4 months like he was doing in 2021. I think he needs to kind of like slow down and just, like he had a big kind of gap between almost a year gap between his last fight with Woodley. Like
Yeah.
I think that's more sustainable. Like because he said he's having difficulties finding opponents. That's another thing with Tommy Fury. Like you put it together and it's fallen through
So
twice
why go
now.
back to that, right?
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Like no one wants to see you put this together and all the the talk on the internet and then it falls through. That's what I'm saying. I think Jake should just I think Nate Diaz should move into doing something before Jake, and then ultimately in like a year's time, or maybe even a little more, like a year and a half. And if Jake wants to do some kind of a tune-up or something, I wouldn't think it would be on Showtime, big pay-per-view. But if he wants to do something a little smaller, or do something for fun in between, maybe he'll do that. But I feel like the best bet would be Nate Diaz, somewhat far down the line.
So I have basically the same thought process. I feel like Nate is like the perfect, like you said, name value, and then the fight. Plus, one thing I like about the fight, and I'm sure you thought about this, is how everybody's always like, "Oh, Jake, he's not a real fighter, right? You know, we need a real fighter step up." And I always think, who's more real than Nate Diaz, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
could you,
right. I agree
yeah,
with you. Like Nate
and could
Diaz,
you imagine? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Nate Diaz is like the ultimate like blue collar like
Yeah, he's
UFC
gonna get
fighter.
in his face.
Right. He's just a gritty like no nonsense dude, and he appeals to a lot of casuals. And and he's also fan of many hardcore fans as well. Like
Mhm.
he's a guy. He's really like the best of all worlds here, and I think he's a good epitome of a guy who would love to knock Jake Paul on his behind.
Exactly. Like he's gonna make it like a drama, right? It's gonna be like a TV show kind of.
Right.
Could you imagine them like the first press conference they do, and then they face off, and then Nate like tries to, like push him and stuff? That would do numbers. Uh,
It'll
so
almost be as good as the Gotcha hat with Floyd.
yeah, exactly, exactly. It would be like another iconic moment.
Uh,
So I have the same thought process as you, right? Like Nate's the best. Also, guys like Uriah Hall, like he, I think name value wise, he would be like a major step down, like compared to Anderson. Uh, and even Tommy Fury, like you touched upon it, like why would you make that? Like it would be a hassle to make that again. But then also, it's like he's also kind of like name value wise a step down from Anderson Silva. Let me ask you. So I definitely think so. This is kind of like the last thing because we kind of touched upon like why Nate should be the next guy. I definitely think if they fight, it will do a lot of pay per view buys. I think it could do like 1 million.
yeah.
But who? So would you give Nate Diaz a better chance to beat Jake Paul than Anderson Silva? Would you give him a better chance, or would you
I
give
think
him
this is
a
tough.
worse?
I think Nate Diaz would definitely be a lot more heavy with his hands than Anderson Silva. Like Anderson Silva was more just being himself, doing his thing,
Yeah,
and
like the
just kind of
intent,
like
right? Yeah,
right, like he was kind of trying to just pick Jake apart, and then Jake was kind of just surviving his best stuff.
yeah,
But I feel like Nate Diaz would be more capable, I guess, of like pummeling him.
yeah. He'll
Like
be a lot meaner in there, right?
right, like
That's what I think.
he's gonna be more intentful to really mess him up. Like
Yeah,
he's gonna come for blood. Like Anderson Silva's a much more classy, distinguished gentleman, you know?
general. Yes, exactly.
Where Nate Diaz is more of just like, yeah, no, I'm gonna F you up and I'm gonna make a ton of money and
Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but I think that could be another
well, here's
attraction
the
to the
thing
fight,
too,
right?
right? Like it kind of is like the whole like concept like a lot of guys are gonna like, and not just fans, but professional fighters are gonna relish in the first person that beats Jake Paul, if anyone ever does, because it's kind of
Yeah,
like hard to tell where Jake's gonna go with this. But like you would think at some point he is going to lose because eventually he's gonna punch too far above his weight.
yeah.
No pun intended.
It's
But
like the perfect culmination. What you're saying, like you got the guy who's gonna get in his face. You got the MMA community who wants Jake Paul to lose. It's like a perfect, like it's coming all together moment, I guess.
yeah, and
But
it's kind of just like, well, is this? I feel like too like now it becomes. I said this to people, and I probably said it multiple times during our coverage of the pre-fight.
hmm
Like, can you picture Jake losing at this point? Like, I think you could picture people giving him a competition, but it's like until like unless he's gonna face someone that's like so far above his level of talent, like if he keeps fighting former, UFC fighters, like right now I just don't see him losing, So it's like
hmm
it's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge whether or not that if
so my
Nate
thing
Diaz,
is, so you would pick him to probably beat. So you're picking him to beat Nate, right?
yeah,
I
as
just
it
want to be
stands right
okay.
now, as it
Yeah,
stands right now, I would say, I'd have to
I would
see
do
what
the
Nate
same.
looks like in training and things like that. And,
Like
how
as of now, I would pick Jake as well. I would agree with you because I just think like if he, like you said, like that Nate, he's like a much more grittier fighter. But like you think like if you were able to beat Anderson Silva, obviously Nate's different, but if you're able to beat Anderson, you should be able to beat Nate. Like that type of thought process. You know what I mean?
right. And I think like it goes back to like how many people like, and this even goes back to Ben Askren, right?
Okay, yeah,
To go back a while, like most people, even though Ben Askren wasn't in like his best shape and he obviously wasn't taking it super seriously, like how many people really like just kind of assume that, well, even though Ben Askren's not really a striker, he wasn't known for his striking. Just being a UFC fighter, just being a mixed martial artist at a professional level is going to
would
make
be
him a million times better at any
yeah,
kind of combat sport than Jake Paul. And then, he obviously dispatched of Askren very quickly. And then, like, Woodley, like, I mean, I went into the first Woodley fight with zero confidence. Like,
yeah. I
like,
remember. Yeah,
I figured Jake would win, but I'm like sitting there, like, I don't know how he's going to do this. Like, I'm like, this is going to, like, it was basically the same way I felt about the Silva fight. Like, I'm like, I really don't think he's gonna knock him out, but like, is he really gonna lose? Like, it ends up just being a decision. And then, then he gets the knockout. It's just, it's such a, it's a spectacle. That's all I could say about it all. It's just a spectacle.
yeah. I agree with you. I feel like as soon as he beat Silva, it's kind of like that hump's kind of over with. Like I don't like the guys we just named, the guys I named. I don't think maybe Tom. Like I would pick Jake to probably beat all of them, but maybe not. Nate would probably be the most interesting in my opinion. But it's kind of like this hump of guys. They don't do that much.
Yeah,
So
well, I think, I mean, I think Nate Diaz would be the most difficult out of all the people we mentioned to
because
beat.
he's the most different, I think.
Right. And the only thing is like, I mean, Tommy Fury obviously isn't like some like renowned boxer.
Yeah.
Um, he's at a relatively low level in the sport. So the only thing about him is like I feel like he could just be like much faster than Jake and just like kind of like outclass him and like make a
Mhm.
like minute difference that ends up like I think Tommy Fury would have a much better chance of beating Jake by decision.
Yeah, but he's not. It's not gonna be like TV drama like you and I are talking about. Like
Right, right, and exactly, and like who like people know who Tyson Fury is, like casual people know Tyson Fury is, but like that still isn't going to make Tommy Fury is going to help sell out Madison Square Garden or help sell out some
yeah,
arena here. Not really. I think and that was a problem. I think with the like someone like Rahman too, and like I think Nate Diaz is just like there's no
he checks
pressure.
off everything.
There's no pressure on Jake Paul to fight a low level boxer just for the sake of facing someone who specifically has a career dedicated to boxing. I think the people who hate Jake Paul are going to hate him no matter what. They're never going to say, "Oh, I was wrong about him. He's legit." They're always going to have an excuse. They're always going to have a thing. They're always going to laugh him off, say he's a joke. They're taking dives for him. Like
Oh
someone
yeah,
posted, you know, it's just one of those things. Like so, it's like, but then at the same time, the people who like him are enjoying the spectacle of him facing these UFC guys. I like the idea. Like, I get it. Like, you want to, we talked about that like tradition of boxing and its reputation. You could ever sit there and say about those things, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's great seeing Anderson Silva still out there. Both the fact just to see him out there and to see him get
yeah,
paid and to see him get paid, like,
and you know him too, right? So you're gonna
yeah.
watch.
And you mentioned it too, like even to see like Nate Diaz face Anderson Silva before facing Jake. Like, I mean, these are just like things like they're fantasy matchups. Like they're like something you never imagined seeing, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it. makes it attractive, makes it appealing. Like I didn't know who Tommy Fury was until he got involved in the Jake Paul stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I understand. So, so I think we pretty much covered when it comes to Jake Paul's future that we both believe it should be Nate Diaz. Will it be Nate Diaz? We have no idea. Personally, I'm just gonna throw out there real quick. I think Nate Diaz maybe he should fight Ben Askren right before the Jake fight in boxing. Can you imagine that? He would just be taunting Ben all the time.
we should
But
get we should get Masvidal versus Ben Askren in a wrestling match.
yeah, yeah. You just keep mixing and matching sports. Have,
Well, here's another
have
question.
yeah, yeah.
Not to totally throw this talk into chaos, but when does Jake Paul try MMA?
So I think he'll try it as soon as if he fights Nate. So let's say he does what we're saying. If he fights Nate and he beats him, I think he goes over to MMA because at this point, I think the somebody told me like who was there at the fight. They said that there's so many MMA fans in the arena, and most of them were there to like boo him. So I
Right.
think it would be like the perfect move to be like, you know what, I'm coming into your backyard now, right? And
Well,
then we just keep, yeah, go ahead.
and I think the whole point of the conversation we're having tonight is that Jake's running out of like opponents now because
Yeah,
now
we're
he's
running out. Yeah,
and I think at this point is it's inevitable for him to make that switch. But I think
mm-hmm.
he needs to just continue to avoid like he needs to avoid um he needs to avoid losing, right? He can't put himself in a
Yeah,
situation where he
basically.
has a really like once he loses, it's probably over.
I mean, you
So
can
I
always
think
shift around and you can make like grudge matches and stuff, but I know what you mean. Like the numbers aren't going to do as well continuously.
right, like but at the same time, like in what world does he go into MMA and win, especially against someone who's actually like
I don't
experienced
know. Like I think you could put him against guys
CM
like you
Punk?
could, yeah, like CM Punk, or you could try to make like him fight another YouTuber because you think about it, he's 6-0 in boxing.
Right, like do what he did in boxing, like face someone like comically, like another YouTuber, like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
athlete,
That's
like
why I
face,
think that's how you should start it.
like build it up slow, right? Like
Yeah, like because you 0-0 again, so you restart the whole thing.
but my thing is like, I mean, obviously he said Canelo just because that's Jake being Jake,
Yeah, he's
but
just trying to
also like
stir the
if
pot.
you overanalyze it and you think too hard into it, also then say like maybe he just likes boxing, maybe he just wants to keep doing boxing, like so it's like it's hard to read, it's hard to gauge him, and you know, and obviously I don't think he's fighting Canelo anytime soon. Maybe when Canelo is 50, you know,
Yeah,
and
like
he's
he's like really, really old.
right, and then Jake will be older at that point too. But you know, I think like maybe he is just wants to do boxing, but um, the possibilities are limitless, and I think that's what makes this
Yeah, because he could be like tomorrow I'm fighting MMA or something.
right. Like we need a break sometimes from the heaviness of the. I mean, because like I said, you know, like the UFC has a show pretty much every week. Boxing, there's big fights going on all the time, especially right now. There's been a ton of fights. Like
Yeah,
there's so much serious, real, high stakes stuff going on right now, and good stuff out there to watch. Like UFC
yeah,
280 just happened, and there was a couple different boxing events this weekend that were going up against Jake Paul. Like there's different
hmm,
things. So I'm just saying like there's so much out there to watch and enjoy from like hardcore fans perspective. Like okay to simmer down and enjoy the
yeah.
fantasy
You
and
need the
enjoy
break. Yeah,
wait, that's what I'm saying. Like it's just like life. Like it's just like it's okay to like laugh a little bit at things. It's okay to like not take everything so seriously. Like
yeah. In the end, it's supposed to be we watch it for entertainment and fun,
it's
and
right,
it gets
like
the job done.
right, like it's like I think like every area of life has room for not to turn this into philosophy class, but it's like every area of life has room for a little bit of humor and silliness and just kind of like
Mm.
questioning the orthodoxies of things. So it's just to me like I don't think Jake is doing boxing a disservice. I don't think he's doing MMA a disservice by beating up their former fighters and champions. Um, I think he's creating his own path, and obviously, like making a lot of money is part of it. Part of it's fame and attention. Part of it's just the fun of it, like
Yeah,
just doing something and winning and competing and carving your own path. And that's something I think that all people should respect. He's building this stuff on his own. He came from facing, Nate, look at the like facing Nate Robinson, retired NBA player, to now
okay.
facing some of the best for mixed martial arts.
Thank you, Counselor Mike. We we appreciate the Jake Paul the moral story, but I think the MMA thing you brought up is very valid. I do think that could come into play, or that will. I think it'll probably be an eventuality, but it's just most likely what you were saying. It's probably a little bit of a distance away in terms of time, but I think that's a good point. So I think we pretty much covered it all when it comes to what's his future. Uh, Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed it because we enjoyed making it. Uh, let's pray that another Jake Paul fight comes very soon, so then we can all hear Mike's takes on but everything Jake Paul. After all, we do pay him for his super fandom of him. So thank you guys, and see you all next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you were listening to, please subscribe to Fans Assemble. And if you can, please give us a rating. Do it for the audio world. They need you.